Welcome to Be Frank Speaks, where we break barriers and build bridges every single week. I am your host, Barbara Frankson, and I know what it's like to break barriers of systematic racism, oppression, and barriers of our past to stand in the place of peace and purpose. Every single week, we come together for important and empowering discussion that will help you to stand on the backs of your barriers and build bridges not only for yourselves, but for others. Join me every single Thursday at 9:19 a.m. for very important and empowering conversation, as well as tools to help you build your own bridges. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get into the topic. Welcome to another episode of Be Frank Speaks. Today I have a very special guest with me, my friend Tiana Blyden. Tiana, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. So how does it feel to finally be able to share what you've been sharing on social media all this time, but really get into like the deep barriers and doing the deep work with the people on the podcast?
It feels like a dream has come true. It really does. Sometimes I have to kind of pinch myself because I never thought, especially how I started out, I never thought that I would be right in this moment, right here, right now. So it feels amazing. Mm-hmm. It feels just like it's another part that fulfills me.
Yeah.
Not even a check mark, but like I always say, it's a God moment. It's a God moment because I used to have a jar of prayers, and I don't believe in New Year's resolutions, so I would put prayers in the jar, and on December 31st, I would put all the prayers that came through, and I was so shocked at what was remaining in the jars because most of my prayers were answered, but so many times we don't acknowledge it. That's why every time that camera goes on, I get even an opportunity to speak to someone in a grocery store. I say, this is a God moment.
Yeah.
Divine connections.
Yeah. When I'm thinking about like what we're talking about today, even the breaking barriers, I've had many conversations with you about the barriers. And I think that it's really important for the people that are watching, the people that are listening, to understand who Barbara Frankson is and what helped her with challenges, what experiences helped her to become who she is, and just so passionate about showing people who they are and living a fulfilled life. I've never met a more energetic 62-year-old.
Yes.
I've never met anybody who's more energetic than you. But also, I remember the moment when I started to understand you, and that was when you invited me, and you were speaking, but it was an audience full of women that didn't look like you. And I remember when I got off of the recording, because you couldn't talk directly to me there, I was so proud. And I was also so grateful to get to know you and your story. One thing in particular that you said was all of you, and you gave the women a charge, the women that didn't look like us. All of you in this room, when there's someone that looks like me, give them the space to speak and give them your attention. And that was very bold of you. But when I started to hear your story, I understood how you got there. So I know you, but it's very important for the people that are listening and watching to get to know you. So what would you say were some of the top 3 barriers that shaped who Barbara Frankson is?
The top 3, when I realized it was a barrier, it wasn't when the barrier was going on. So the very first one was coming into this country. I mean, listen to me. I don't sound Jamaican, right? And at first I thought they were trying to help me. But when I was in 4th grade, 4th grade, and I came into a classroom and no one looked like me. No one looked like me. No one sounded like me. No one understood me. That's a barrier right there. But that barrier later became advantageous because I was used to being in rooms where I was the only black person. I was used to being in rooms where I'm on the phone and they don't think I'm black. Barbara Frankson. Frankson is a German name. But I remember they put me in speech for 3 years. And I thought they were trying to help me, Tiana. But I realized they were trying to strip me of my ethnicity.
Ooh.
That's why you got to know who you are. So that was one of the barriers right there. But the barrier, I always say, and people will always hear me say, everything is purposeful. But when you're in a pain, you're not going to see that. But it prepared me for the rooms that I would go into. That room that you saw me in, I was more comfortable in a white room. And what I mean by white room, let me define that. Where everybody's white but me. Back to what I spoke about in one of the episodes. Mr. B. Look everyone in their hand, in their eyes. Sit, walk straight. He taught me. So the barrier was not for me. It was for them.
Wow.
Basically. Because I saw who I was. And they needed to see who I was. So God gifted me with this, words. So the biggest barrier, one of the biggest barrier is to be seen for not this, but for what's inside of us.
Ooh.
Come on now.
That's so good. That's so good. I think that's something that we struggle with. And I'm so happy that you're doing this podcast because there are, countless women and men. But, the focus here is on women, countless women who have survived, their entire life. What we just learned this weekend. They tried not to lose, but they never tried to win.
Right.
At life, and there's so many women who just don't understand how everything that they have been through has prepared them for this moment.
Absolutely.
Everything. I was reading something the other day, and it was actually while we were on the plane coming back from the conference, and one of the things that it said is that regret is a tool. And what they said about regret, they said scientifically and physically, according to the law of physics, that whenever your regret is at the highest, that's when you have the most ability to change the situation.
Absolutely.
And and they said it was really about how you look at it. Because when you regret something, but you regret the person you are, you can't change it because you're shaming yourself. But when you regret the actions that you took, you can just become somebody different and change the action.
That's it.
So I love that you just said it started off as a barrier for me, but then it became advantageous and it was a barrier for them.
Right.
Because you took what happened and you understanding that how the importance of what happened and the why, but you also took responsibility and control. That's just it's so powerful, and more women need the women in their lives that can give them the courage and also the equipment to do that same thing.
Yeah, because once you're in bondage, you can't see, right? Bondage, barriers, you can't see that. But I wish I could say that I saw the barrier right away. But I had to go into my toolbox. That's a tool that God gave me. And that's why it's so important that we understand that it didn't come to hurt us. It didn't come to hurt us. It's preparing. Everything has prepared me for this. The barrier we create sometimes because we're not looking with the right eye. Right? So we're not looking with the right eye. So we have to be able to go back, like I said, and speak from the scar not the wound, because there's a story in the scar.
Yeah.
But if you're looking with the wrong eyes, if you're still being bitter instead of better, if you don't see your value, that's why I'm saying, okay, I'm in that room. I'm in the room for a reason, but it got me to be able to go into bigger and better rooms. So that's a barrier, is language, right? But if you look at music, it's a universal. It's universal. So even if you're listening to a song that is Spanish, I love Spanish music, and sometimes I don't understand what they're saying, and it could be something crazy, right? But the rhythm, it speaks to us all in the same place, depending on where we are. Because every single one of us, even me and you right now, we're either in a storm, coming out of a storm, or approaching a storm. But one thing I know is how you go through it.
Yeah.
Whether you're in it, going through, and no one can say they're not at those places. So the barriers, one of the biggest barriers, number 2, in our mind.
Talk to me about that. Talk to me about the mind barriers, because
the mind barriers,
that mindset,
everything.
mindset is everything. I mean, I never, when we look at people that are successful versus people that aren't, and how they respond to challenges and everything, it all starts with the mind. All starts with the mind. And even people that we think are successful, because they don't have the right mindset, they're not really successful. They're still searching and seeking and just living a life that has material things, but they're not fulfilled.
Right. And even when they say they're fulfilled, they really aren't, because your mind is still the same. That's why you can't see. That's why you see it as a barrier instead of breakthrough. Come on, I see it. That's not a barrier, because I look back over my life and said, I've been there before. Yeah. So you break through, and it's real easy. Everything is purposeful, right? So, as a man thinketh, so shall it be. Your mind. When I was growing up, there was a commercial that took an egg and it fried it, and it said that was our brain on drugs, and a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Because if you don't understand, mindset is this, and people are like, okay, you hear mindset coaches and this like that, okay. It's more than being coached. Someone can coach you on mindset, but you got to do the work to change your mindset.
Say that again.
You got to do the work, because it comes in your belief system. That's why it goes back to another show that I talked about, your value. Come on, it's all connected. Everything is purposeful. It's all connected.
Yeah.
So your mindset, if you do not change your mind, right? I have a coffee cup that says, be strong and do the work. And on the other side, it says sometimes you got to do the work to be strong. But what I know about being strong, mindset, do the work, mindset. Everything revolves around there, because you got to transform your mind in order for your heart to change.
Yeah.
And God tells us to guard our heart and our mind. See, it makes sense. But if we're just reading merely words and being religious, and it's not going to work. If we're just going through the motions of life, I have no regrets in my life, because everything happened for a reason. Yeah. And now, even now, God gives me downloads and goes, remember when that happened? Tia and I started writing stories down, giving them names to my life. And then I'd go back and say, okay, God, show me the lesson, show me the lesson, show me the lesson. Because it was never about me, but it was about this. Do you think I wanted to do this?
Probably not. Nobody does.
I was like, when God started talking to me, I was running. But this year, 2024, he said, no more.
You can't outrun God.
I can't. I surrender.
You cannot outrun God.
I surrender everything to him. And that's all about the mindset. The barriers of being from here we go for the third one. The barrier from being from here to there is right here. Back again, because if you can imagine it, you got to see it before you can become it. You hear that all the time. And I used to okay, I'd say it. Yeah, I got to see it. Oh, rah, rah, rah. and then I ain't doing no work.
It's hard work to come with it.
It's hard work. It's discipline. It's consistency. It's all of that stuff. But you can't be disciplined. You can't be consistent. You can't value if your mindset has not changed. It's all here. Mind and heart, mind and heart, mind and heart. Think about it. Out of the mouth, what? The heart speaks.
Yeah.
Yes.
How did you, I think that is really important that you're talking about the fact that you didn't want to do this. I mean, honestly, because people are listening and you're talking about you being fulfilled and they see you executing. But a part of breaking the barriers has a lot to do with doing things that you do not want to do, that are very uncomfortable for you, and you still got to do it anyway.
Yeah. It brings me back to the little girl that was bullied, the little girl that voice was taken. When I speak, people hear me and they say, you're very articulate, you do this, but every single time I speak, I get that little notch in my stomach. But then my mind kicks in and God said, whose are you, Barbara?
Right.
Who are you? Right? So I didn't want to do it at first. When I first had to, I remember my very first assignment. And what I mean by that is going into a school after being coached formally, because I was coached a lot of times, but formally. And I remember walking up to that school and I was like, why does that feel like it does? That's the feeling that I had when I had to walk into those doors. That's the feeling. I used to skip my class just not to do an oral presentation because I didn't want to speak.
And here you got a podcast.
And here I got a podcast. Here I got a podcast. Here I'm speaking all the time.
Consistently.
Consistently. But guess what? Where your pain is, your purpose is. Come on now. Girl, I want to run. I'm going to try to sit
She might
still.
run on one of these podcasts at some point.
I want to run. Because when I look, because even we are the biggest barrier to ourselves. I know you asked for 3, but I have so many.
No,
because I'm 62. But listen, 9/11, 2017, I landed in Paraguay doing my first transformational table. And do you know why that was so pivotal? I used to be afraid to fly. Tiana, if I was afraid to fly, I would not be able to be an international inspirational speaker for God. I wouldn't be able to go to places and speak. I wouldn't be able to go to places to be brought into rooms that don't look like me, that I know is a God room. But my gifting, my pain, my purpose, it's all a connection. But what's changed? This and this. This and this.
Yeah.
Because in order for us to break through those barriers, we got to break through the ones that's within us. We can't go out there trying to kick in doors for people to when we still don't really, you're speaking it, but how's your life when the camera's turned off?
Fruit.
What's your fruit?
That fruit matters.
Where's your fruit? You eating the apple?
That fruit matters.
Yes.
It matters so much. And in order to get to it, though, you have to come through barriers.
Yeah.
You had to change your mind about flying to fly where God wanted to take you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You had to change your mind about speaking
Yeah.
to be able to speak into the lives of the people you speak to. It's so interesting because, you know, I feel like the enemy comes early before you know who you are to come and steal what you have so that because there's something that happened that made you afraid to speak. You lost your voice long before you knew you had one.
I lost my voice long before I knew I had one in it. And we can go back to even before I came. I speak about this openly. I'm not ashamed of it. I was molested at a very early age.
Yeah.
I am no longer bound by it. That's a barrier. That's a barrier, allowing the childhood things that happened to you.
Yeah.
To define who you are and to hold you back and to stop you from speaking and stop you from living the life. And even when we are making a lot of money, it's just money if you're not making enough to fund your purpose.
Come on.
To fund your purpose. If you are trying to make money just to buy the cars, how many cars can you drive?
Right.
I prefer Uber now. I have a driver. That's what I say. I have a driver that drives me. So you have to really sit there and you have to think about those things that stops us. But we are our biggest barrier. But once you break through that barrier of the mind, the heart, and then you gotta let go. Here goes barriers.
Let go.
Let go of the naysayers. You know what I'm saying? In the Bible, they call them, believe it's foes. Foes. Those friends that
Start with the same letter, but
right.
they not really your friend.
Yeah. I like to call them frenemy. Your frenemy. Because they're just close to you. They come to steal, kill, destroy. Because you might think they don't see you. My bully saw me. They saw me. And they said, we're going to destroy her.
They always see.
Well, the other D is this. We're going to distract her. We came to distract you.
That's a whole...
Having drama and conversations and distractions. You know, all of us have them.
Yeah.
But you got to break through that. But if you cannot hear, we got to listen to hear. And that's why you have to spend time alone with God. You can't break through no barriers, baby, if you don't do that.
You got to see yourself.
Come on now.
Or you're not going to be, you're going to be distracted.
Right.
You're going to feel like you have to entertain it. But when you know who you are,
yeah,
you stop entertaining the things you used to entertain.
And when you know who people are, like from the first moment I met you, I saw you. I saw you. I saw you, even though it was crowded. Even though there were a lot of women there, I saw you because I felt your spirit coming before I even saw you. Right? And people might say, you are beautiful. No. I saw inside the inner woman, the spirit of the woman. That's what I saw. And you taught me. One thing that I value, here goes another bonus. Knowing who's sitting in the room with you and knowing who is standing and speaking to you. Because one of the biggest barriers is not seeing someone else's value. But you can't see. If you can't see your value, how you gonna see theirs?
Come on.
Right? You can't, but I saw that. And I'm gonna tell you one of the lessons you taught me. Where's your fruit? The fruit. And you can only get fruit if you're willing to get pruned.
Honey, you gotta get pruned. You gotta start letting things go.
You gotta start.
There's in the Bible, a lot of times when it talks about growth, there's a process. God talks a lot about pruning. He goes to plants and trees a lot. But there is a parable where he talks about farming. And farmers are very interesting to watch. Because, when God talks about the animals, he's talking about the lions and the ant and the eagle.
Right.
A lot of times he goes between those animals. But when he's talking about plants and flowers and farming, there is a process in farming that God taught me through. And it's called the tilling process. So what happens is, basically, when you plant in soil. And when it's a new season for a farmer to plant again, the soil is very hard. So when you plant, and you'll see this at farms, when you plant in the new season, you have to till the ground properly. Because if you don't till the ground and soften the ground, you can put a seed inside of it, and you can water it all day, but the water is never going to make it to the seed. And one of the things that God was showing me is that the tilling process is the process of dealing with the conditions of your own heart. The things that happen over the season, it may not even be your fault. But it hardened the soil. And even though you have a seed, you can't receive the water.
That's it.
But tilling is hard. Because you got to take responsibility for some things. It's not even your fault. And you have to take responsibility for maybe the relationships that you allowed because you thought that they were good for you, but they're not. And be okay with it so that you can be watered and bring forth fruit in the season. And I think that, when you're talking about the barrier of yourself, the barrier of yourself. Like that's the biggest battle that the biggest enemy you're gonna fight is the inner me.
Yeah, the enemy.
That's the biggest battle. It's not about anybody else outside. And so I love that you're talking about this because as an authority figure and one who helps women and see them and help them to walk in purpose and teach them to use their words and to facilitate and to show up, you're still saying, hey,
Yeah.
I got to work through some things too.
Right.
One of my clients asked me something. She said, how do you do this without being scared? I said, can I tell you something? I'm always scared.
Always scared.
I'm always scared.
Yes.
Because most of the things that I've done and continue to do, I have never seen it done before. I don't, beyond God giving me the word, there's nothing, there's no blueprint. There are no footsteps that I can follow to do it.
Right.
I just have to hold on to the word and go blindly. And when you're in the snow and there's a snowstorm, you know, when the first person goes over the tracks, it's easier for everybody else.
Right, absolutely.
Because it's not fresh snow. You're not slipping and
Right.
sliding all over the place. But when you are the first,
Right.
it's difficult.
It is difficult, and I've been the first of so many, and that brings us to systematic barriers.
Whew.
Systematic barriers. 32 and a half years. I had a career where I was the first in many things. And I have to say this, though. I trusted God because I knew if he brought me to it, he'll bring me through it. But once again, back to Mr. B. Back to that thing that taught me my value, to be in the rooms where they tried to take my ethnicity, prepared me for going to a job that tolerated me instead of celebrating me. That's why you got to celebrate yourself. So systematic barriers, if I couldn't break through the barriers within me, how am I going to go and say, well, let's sit down and have a conversation with leaders that do not look like you and say, I want you to see me in the room. Okay, you don't want me at the table? I'm going to build my own table. I'm going to bring my chair to that table, and you're not going to take my voice. Right? So I had 5 different positions in 32 and a half years, and every single one I had to fight for. Every single one. But it wasn't just me in the fight. I was just a vessel that God was using. All the people that you see that has fought civil rights, like Martin Luther King and everyone, my grandmother, your parents, you fought. I had a conversation just last night with a young lady that is where we're filming now in Atlanta. And she's only 42. And she said that their proms were separate. I was like, what?
Ooh.
She said, we weren't allowed to have proms with the whites. I was like,
Oh my
what?
gosh. In Atlanta.
And she's young, 20
Wow.
years younger than me. And then that made me realize at 62, my privilege. My privilege, because I was 9 years old. Do the math, go back, 71. And she's a lot younger, and I was in a household where there was a white man that was teaching me my value. God showed me him to say, no, not all of them. I'm saying them because whites and blacks, that's what I'm saying. Us, blacks, them, white. But we have so much more in common that I know that because I was at those rooms.
Yeah.
So I was the first black, female or male, to have some of the positions that I held.
Whoa.
But I knew that God was paving the way. I had a boldness that wasn't mine. The same boldness that when it comes time for me to speak, God goes, okay, all you got to do is surrender, Barb.
Yeah.
Just raise your hands, just do that. And I go because I said, okay, God, let me see me the way you see me. And I see you bold. I see you courageous. I see that you can do this. Because guess what, Barbara? Your purpose was created before you were created. And everyone that you meet is a divine connection. That's why I take my time. I take my time and just let it marinate. Don't rush through a room. Don't rush to the goal instead of enjoying the process.
Right.
So even the process in my 32 and a half years of systematic bear, that's for something bigger. Because you know what I'm going to do, Tiana? I'm going to bring it to the world. I'm going to use what the enemy meant for evil and turn it around. Because that's what God says. I'm using you to turn it around. God is the one, when we look at scriptures and he says, what God will do for turn, he needs vessels though. I'm an open vessel. And that's what it is. But in order to be an open vessel, we have to be able to deal with the little things. In order for God to bless you with big things, you have to deal with the little things. You have to be able to handle your finance. You want to be a millionaire and you can't even balance your checkbook. What is going on?
Right.
You want to go and talk about barriers and you still having this barrier and you're doing diversity, equity, inclusion. First of all, I don't do diversity, equity, and inclusion. I do racism and exclusion. Yeah, I said it. Racism and exclusion, that's what I do. Because I like to look at a situation as what it looks like. And having that conversation with that young lady yesterday, 20 years different, separate proms, that took me to a whole, it made me see how important, I saw how important, but it is necessary.
Yes.
It is necessary. We have to kick some doors down.
Yeah.
Because guess what? Our ancestors did more. 42, she's younger than me.
And still dealing with stuff.
And still dealing with things. Still dealing with things. So systematic barriers, we didn't ask for it. It was set up. But guess what? Greater is he that's in us, he that's in the world. So guess what? We're going to do this. But first we have to deal with ourselves. So systematic barriers is one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do. That was my money. I was a single mom. But I was never scared because of the boldness that he gave me.
Wow.
That's the only reason. The human side of me was probably like, okay.
I probably should be quiet
Yeah,
because I need to pay my bills.
I'm about to, because I'm the one, I'm that one, that if I'm not in agreement, I'm walking out the door. I remember them putting me on a committee for diversity. That's why I don't play with that word. And I got off, and they called me and said, Barbara, why'd you get off? I said, because I don't deal with fluff. They go, what? And I said, I don't deal with fluff. I'm in a room saying that we want to make it better for the minorities here, and then I go downstairs, and I have a supervisor that times me when I go to the bathroom. And how I know she times me is she says, you've been gone for 7 minutes.
Right.
What were you doing? Do I really have to describe to you?
And are you timing
Right.
everybody else that don't?
So
look
tell
like
me that, see, they might think that you're not free, but you have to realize that you're free. You have to realize, and that's what I'm talking about, the barriers that we create in ourselves.
Yeah.
Free yourself first before you try and go to free others. Because it's hard, it's rough out there. It's rough, but like I said, if you really go back over your life, you will see that those weren't barriers. They were blessings to help you to push through what society deems as barriers.
So we're going to take a break, guys, but when we come back, Barbara's going to tell us a little bit more about Penny Potter
Oh, Penny Potter. Yes.
and Rifle.
Oh, absolutely.
I can't wait to hear about that.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is going to be a 2-part episode because there's a lot more to talk about.
Thank you so much for listening to the Be Frank Speaks podcast this week. We covered another topic on breaking barriers and building bridges, and now I invite you to do the work. Follow the instructions that I gave to you in this week's episode, and I will see you next Thursday at 9:19 a.m. as we dive into another topic. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast.